Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bitcoin for Family show, where every guest is your new BFF. That's your Bitcoin friend forever. I'm Scott from Shamri, and it's an honor to have you all here again. Thanks to everybody that's watching, listening along the past few weeks. It's been a blast putting these together and interviewing everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying the other side of it. So for this week's show, I'm excited to not only welcome another father, but the first former professional athlete to join the show. So we'll be able to touch on some topics around sports and the like. So thanks for taking the time to join Brandon Gentile. How you doing?
Scott, thanks so much for having me. I always love hanging with you. We don't get to do it enough, but sometimes we have to do it virtually, and I can't wait to talk about Bitcoin and family. And I love what you guys are doing too, because we need so much more Bitcoin content, and there's so many different angles and niches to come at it from, and you're filling another one of those gaps in content and things that people need to kind of touch into. So I love what you guys are doing.
No, thanks for the kind words. Like you said, there's lots of niches and gaps. So whether it's what we're doing, what you're doing, what Bitcoin Trading Cards is doing, we can touch on that. There's all these different sides of things that can merge together. And yeah, we don't get to see each other enough. It was a quick hide this year in Vegas a few weeks ago with everything going on. But it's always fun to see each other in person, probably going on 2-3 years now, whatever it's been. So it's always good getting to know, and one day get the families together in the same spot too, probably.
Yep.
Well, before we dive into that, speaking of families, maybe let's let the audience get to know who you are and your family. So maybe just share a little bit about yourself, your family size, who's in that, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, and then we can dive into more of the questions.
So I have my wife, Jessica. We've been married for a decade now, and we have a whole crazy story that don't need to get into necessarily today, but we have just a crazy story of us being together. And then we have 4 children, 8, 6, 4, and 2, and girl, boy, girl. And we, so that they are all in the various ages of obviously learning, sports, development. We're homeschooling the kids. Just started doing that end of last year. So that was a big change in our schedule, our life, and just kind of the things we get to do. So, but a huge blessing, and it's something that we knew, it's inherently something we kind of knew inside after a while. One of them was in compulsory school for a couple of years. And it just took us a little bit to kind of rearrange things to get to the point of being able to homeschool. Funny side note, so many of the people you talk to about homeschooling nowadays, obviously it's how kids really learn for thousands of years to a large extent. And society's kind of coming back to that. And you talk to so many people, and really there's almost no pushback on homeschooling anymore, which is pretty wild. And most people agree, actually. And obviously the last 5 years really helped, I think, change a lot of people. And then so you have some of those black swan events, but you just have a lot of logistics that people deal with, right? Like the homes, the lives they live already, and that you find yourself in just from the day to day, these lives that existed before, say, this event happens, or these things that kind of change your thought pattern. So it's really wild to see how people have turned to, hey, I wish I could do this, or hey, I get it. This is the best way. Unfortunately, we can't do it right now. So really fascinating conversations. I'm sure it's conversations that you have with people, obviously, with your business and what is happening. And then Bitcoin, obviously, is an overarching theme of why you and I met and why many of us have met, and hopefully fixing these incentives so that way people can do the things that they just they didn't have the knowledge or the belief of before, or just didn't think it was necessary, or, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many reasons that maybe people weren't doing it, but now you see people coming back to it because they have the ability to do it, and Bitcoin giving them that ability to do that, whatever it might be. So all that being said, there's the 6 of us total. We talked about having 5 or 6, so there could be more potentially in the future, God willing. So we'll see. And it's just been giving us so much more time to do things with family. Bitcoin gives you that ability. The homeschooling gives you that ability, and traveling around, hopefully, like you and I just talking offline, going to more Bitcoin events together over time, bringing the kids now as they're getting older to see, really, like, again, all the businesses, all the products that you create and Aladdin creates, all these different things that are going on, but then like the energy that's there. It's really fascinating, as anyone that's been to Bitcoin conferences, to see all this energy at the conference and the type of person that is generally there. That's what I want my kids around. So I obviously make, Bitcoin content creator. I help Aladdin with Bitcoin trading cards, and my wife's an attorney. So we kind of are all over the place, but we have a flexible schedule that gives us the ability to homeschool, and we both tackle it. We both have our own subjects that we tackle, and then we'll kind of go off on our way depending on what day it is, and she'll go do the stuff she needs to do, or I'll go do the stuff I need to do. So it's really an incredible thing that's just kind of, taken a few years to work itself out, but feel very blessed and as to what we're doing right now, and giving us the ability to go spend time at conferences or go spend time with family and stuff like that. So and then spend more time with our kids. 'Cause that was the one big thing. The last thing I'll say on this is, I had that feeling, even the kid just dropping them off at school or whatever it was, my memory each night was just tucking them into bed at night, basically. And they'd get home from school, and then, they would do homework for a little bit or whatever it was. Even at a young age, they had work to do, or like, oh, we got to do some more reading or whatever. And then we'd have dinner, and then maybe they'd play with their siblings for a little bit. And then it was all of a sudden, it's like, oh, it's 8 o'clock or 8:30. We're like, we're going to bed. And then it was like my only memory. Like, we left at like 6:30 or 7:30 this morning. And when do I get time with you? So it's like, dang. So it's just wild. So anyway, that's our family dynamic. No crazy big stuff yet. And like you said, I've played hockey my whole life and played at very high levels. And that world of, we're not in any travel sports or anything right now, and don't need to be right the second. Definitely not pushing that. If the kids want to do that eventually, then great. But that is a massive time suck as well. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, you are gone. You're away from the rest of your family. So you might be with your immediate family, but your family might be broken up a little bit, even at that, just your immediate nuclear family, because of the travel schedule. So we're not even doing any of that. Life's already crazy enough. I can't imagine adding like that kind of travel to what we're doing. But I think that's another thing where, ironically, I do have some talks later this year, in October, that I might be giving some on the American Revolution in Bitcoin, but also the like sports in Bitcoin, and how a lot of that, like I've got a lot of thoughts of just like, again, like, and I've battled a lot of people, family, friends, stuff like that, of just the thoughts of, like, well, you played, professional hockey, or like you play, you did this growing up or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but I lived a life where like my family could travel together a lot, but I saw a lot of families who didn't get to travel together. They had a bunch of children or whatever it was. I had two other siblings, but we are varying ages and varying genders. So like, we got to travel all the time together, and my mom and dad did, which is not very usual. And especially in the hockey world, it's like away from school and it's not school affiliated. So we had a lot of families that were broken apart in the sense of, literally and figuratively, where like they just couldn't be together all the time. And I always looked at that, and you're always kind of like, okay, as a kid, you don't think about it too much, but you look back and you're like, wow, like I understand why maybe some of those families didn't make it, or like they broke apart, or like literally, and things like that, because they weren't together that much. I guess moral of my whole story, as I'm going on 10 different tangents, is, what are you designing your life for, and what's the end goal at the end of the day? Like, why is, I think the problem with society, I think many Bitcoiners, we've all gone down these paths already of like, what am I designing my life for? And what's the end goal? What's my actual end goal? Am I trying to get them here just because this is what society's been doing for a while, and this is what I did growing up? Or is it because I'm designing where I want this train to end up at some point? And that's the thing you can see, I think, as a Bitcoiner. Like, a lot of people just don't ask. None of us have asked those questions for a long time. And Bitcoiners are just the early adopters that have started really asking, hey, why am I sending my kid to a compulsory school? Or why am I playing travel sports? Is it just because of what I did and what society is telling me to do? Because the end goal might not be exactly what you want it to be. So anyway, we can touch in some more of those things, and like in hockey, and like how, sports changes you. Great things, but just trying to be the 0.0001% of society that's I'm gonna bank my life on like trying to, play professionally, and it depends on what gender you are, obviously. And gender, can maybe do it for a living, but at what, to 30 or 40 years old, where women don't even have those opportunities to necessarily play at, it's like, it's a whole thing. And that's why I'm kind of writing some literature on it and stuff like that, because it's just things that people just haven't thought about for a long time. It's just assumed for decades of, this is like the cool thing to do. This is amazing. Like, yay, like glorify these people. And it just, no one stepped back to think like, well, why am I doing this? So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, there's a beautiful soapbox. You definitely touched on so many of the topics that I have planned to touch on today. So we'll dive back into those for sure. I'm happy that my planning for the show coincided with the intro that you laid out there, because it dovetails perfectly. So we'll definitely get to pull on some of those even more. And before we do that, let's start on the fun side of things. So with some quick icebreakers to even let the people know you a little bit better. So you mentioned hockey side of things. So the first question that I had to think of, so you've probably seen your fair share of on-ice battles over the years when you were playing. So how old were you the first time you had to drop gloves, and did you win?
Oh man, great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. Yeah, so it's funny. Yeah, I was actually just talking to my wife about this the other day. It's weird because you and I are of similar age, and we were in a bunch of us were just talking recently, some of my family members, we were talking about how the last generation of like, pre-cell phone even, or like this era where kids could kind of just be kids, and people weren't breathing down your neck of like, hey, you be perfect, and like you're on candid camera, or like you're, being recorded somewhere, like you're having to live like these ulterior lives in essence. You can't just be a kid and learn. But also like I grew up with a father who was I wanted to be in the military my whole life. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL or a fighter pilot. And it was always, I wanted to be around people that excelled. I was firstborn. I think, firstborn, from what I can tell, what I've studied, firstborns tend to just be a lot of times like you're just kind of blazing the trail. You're really getting after it and you just got to kind of go. And so that was always my mentality. My dad had that mentality, and it was kind of like a no prisoners, take no mercy on the ice. I name for a long time was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So there's a reason I'm explaining all this, is because again, you and I spent time together. Everyone was always like, Brandon, he's such a nice person, like off the ice. He's such a, but like, man, like once the game starts, like he's kind of like, is a different person. And, that was just my mentality. Once the clock started ticking, or inside the lines, as they say, or inside on the ice or whatever, it was just, I was not a nice person. And so like, all that being said, that's where like you kind of, like boys need their outlets, like, men need their outlets. Like there is something to that. But at the same time, as I got older and I started realizing, I started getting hurt. I realized how many people I hurt over the years. All that being said, your original question of, I was probably like literally like 5 or 6. The first time I like actually was like, in a fight on the ice, like fighting people. All that being said though, it was, and the reason I was saying this earlier too, of we've kind of lost this era of like cell phones. Like I probably would have been on a cell phone. Like I would have been recorded, and who knows, like my life could have been drastically different. I think that's what's kind of sad in a way, is like my life could have been drastically different, because I remember just, just wailing on some kids, like growing up, but like, something would happen. Like it didn't do it just because necessarily, like something would happen. And I was never a person that provoked things. I was always like a defender or protector. That's my nature. So, and again, that's where I think the Bitcoiner thing comes from, right? I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners I have always seen a lot of Bitcoiners as like, you have innovators and like inventor mentality, and maybe some cypherpunks, but also like protectors. I think a lot of like Bitcoiners are protector personalities, where they want to protect other people. They're trying to protect their family, protect humanity. And so, it was literally 5, 6, 7, and I get in fights a fair amount actually. And so the funny part about all this though, is again, you're a little kid. So like you can't really hurt yourself. We have cages on, stuff like that. It's like, you're not really getting hurt by any means, but my dad always jokes still to this day. He's like, you and Sean, like, man, that was like your best buddy. He's like, you guys would like wail on each other at practice. And then like after practice, he'd be like, hey, can Sean come over and play? And so that was just like, that was a mentality. I think that was like for a lot of boys for thousands of years, that was just the way boys were. And you're just like, hey, go beat each other up. And like, hey, you'd forget 20, 30 minutes later, and you're like, okay, like, let's go play at each other's house, or let's go whatever. We've lost a lot of that. In wrapping this part up, and we've been going on some tangents here, but I wrote an article like a few years ago about society, and the problem with society, at least in my eyes, was that men just hadn't been punched in the face. And we have a lot of men in society that have never been punched in the face before. And I say that in like, not in jest, but it's like, it's funny, but it's also true in the sense of a lot of the problems I've seen in my life come from like, and this is where the snowflake term comes from. So many people like have anxiety over like, I'm making a decision. Like, wait, what? Like you can't make a decision, like I get not knowing what decision is to make, or, something like that. Like we all have things where we got to take it. You can only make a decision with the information you have at hand. But like, that shouldn't be giving you like massive anxiety where like you're literally like in bed and like you can't function anymore or something like that. And yes, and we're gonna get some comments where people are like, well, yes. And there's always a 1% case of society. And that's the problem with society though. Now we've now based most of society off of like the 0.001%. And so we're trying to adjudicate and govern society based off of all these tail risk, or like all these 0.001% cases. I mean, you look across society and almost everything in the Western world is based off of now the 0.0001%. And so therein lies a massive problem. Bitcoins are trying to fix that. But now again, in wrapping what you're saying, many fights early on, but it was a good thing. Like it was just boys being boys. And it also gave you this, like men need that. And then not all men. Again, that's where like, I know I get in trouble is I talk in absolutes a lot, but I think it's just me trying to move the Overton window. And most boys need to be punched in the face in the sense of you need to understand merit and accountability, responsibility. You need to understand, hey, if I do this, there are consequences. Like this might happen. I can't just run my mouth, or I can't just type keyboard warrior comments, because there are consequences to that. And we've been so removed from consequences in society that that's one thing that hockey absolutely shows you. You punch someone in the face, you're going to get punched right back. And I think that's why it's the greatest sport in the world, because it polices itself and you're able to do those things. And like boys are able to be boys, and then you kind of get it out. And then, you go play at their house afterward. You go have a beer afterward or something like that. That's what I think, society has missed. And then when I got older, I'd probably be in 5-10 fights a year, like actual, and people can go find them on YouTube. There's not not all of them. There's probably 10 or 20 of them that are on YouTube, and from all different levels of sophistication and video and old school video phones and who knows what. But yeah, it's a very different sport, a very different life, but it's given me just a different appreciation of whatever it might be: decision making, accountability, and merit, responsibility, and just how you conduct yourself, and knowing I don't need to, what's the saying, like, like there's all the toxic masculinity stuff people talk about nowadays. It's you think strong men are a problem, like just wait until you meet a weak man. That couldn't be truer. And you don't want caged animals, and you want men who understand responsibility and accountability. And that's, again, why there's so many problems we have in the world, is because we've lost that art of, people are now just sitting and playing games all day on a screen, and there's no accountability. I can just type comments on a keyboard instead of having to face, little Johnny down the street, and you're getting in a fight in the sandlot playing baseball. That just doesn't happen anymore, unfortunately. And that's a scary thing, but hey, we're humans, we're going to adapt somehow. And I think Bitcoiners are going to be the ones that pull us out of a lot of that as we go forward. But that's a very long-winded way of answering your first question, Scott. So bear with me.
No, it was perfect. No, and I knew there'd be a good story just considering what the Bitcoin trading card of yourself was. So that's kind of where that was the genesis of it. No, for those that don't know, go pick up Series 3, and Brendan's on one of the cards and happens to be in a fighting stance there. So I figure there is a good story behind all of that madness. So perfect there. And sticking with the hockey theme for number 2. So you got the 4 kids and yourself and your wife. If you have to assign a position on the ice to each of your family members, what would they be?
Wow, that's another phenomenal question I've never been asked before. It's funny too, like the card, I won't go into all the detail, but there's a story. I told a lot of the guys, or a lot of the pack stackers in Vegas, I was telling the story, because there's multiple meanings behind the card too, actually, which is one of them, like the one you touched on, isn't even what I shared with some of the people. So anyway, really wild. But people want to know, message me, and I'll let you know that too. It's there's multiple meanings of my childhood, and the one thing I will say is that the people that have seen the card is that the back of the jersey, the guy that's on the ice, it's basically a famous photo, long story short, of a huge rivalry between the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings in the NHL. And I grew up in Michigan, big Detroit Red Wings fan. And they had this, one guy cheap shot this guy, which, basically, hurt this one guy on the Red Wings, from the Avalanche guy did. And so it was like this huge thing for like a number of years, like tons of fights and brawls that would go on because of this one incident. And that's like the famous one of this guy getting revenge basically on the guy that was turtling on the ice. And for anyone that's seen the card, the whole reason I had that though as well, that was my personal part, but the part that brings in Bitcoiners is that the guy on the ice in the card it says NWO on the back. So it's New World Order. So it's basically all of us Bitcoiners taking out the New World Order. So that was, boy, on the ice, that's a really good question. My oldest daughter she'd probably be, boy, wow, that's really tough. She'd probably be a defenseman, and I was a defenseman. And defensemen are kind of like the quarterbacks on the ice. Goalies maybe to a degree, but they're just not close enough to the action all the time. But defensemen are just the quarterback of everything. They can see the whole ice. They can see everything. And they're kind of like the linchpin of the game, really. Where forwards get a lot of the credit. Forwards are like the flashy, goal scorers. They're the ones, generally putting the puck in the net. And then the goalies are characters. Goalies are interesting animals, just a whole different world. And I'm trying to think about my youngest daughter, my 2-year-old, probably be the goalie. She's just an eclectic personality, and goofy. That's kind of like goalies. Goalies, you just don't know. They're going to be like, goalies could be like the jock of jocks, or they could be like the biggest nerd, or they're like, goalies are like the coolest creatures on earth. And I think there's a lot of sports. I don't think goalies in any sports, they're like, macho guy, nerd guy. It doesn't matter. Like any personality, you just have like some type of interesting personality. That's a goaltender. So, which is so funny. And the defensemen are very close to goalies too. So that's why I can say that, because I was close to many of them, and they all have their own personalities. Probably my daughter, because she's just a goofball. She's a card. And then if you have goofballs, you like, just stuff like that. And then defenseman would probably be my oldest, and then my son probably as well, just because, or I guess maybe me. So me and my firstborn daughter, and then my wife was actually, so my wife played softball growing up at Michigan State. So that's where her and I met. Like I was telling you our story earlier, I just briefly mentioned we have a crazy story, but I played hockey at Michigan State. She played softball at Michigan State, and she was extremely fast. She was a walk-on, was actually an incredible player in high school, but like wasn't recruited. It was just small Catholic school she went to. And I think she hit like, 750, like, through 3 for 4 in every single game basically that she ever played in high school. And so like she got to college, walked on, and they're like, yeah, you're never going to play. This is just walk-on tryouts. And then she made the team from the walk-on tryouts, which is generally not supposed to happen. Like pretty much all NCAA sports, they have like whatever the governing body, like they force you to have walk-on tryouts, and almost no one makes them. I think maybe football maybe is the one sport just because they take so many guys and they'll have some walk-ons each year, but almost in every sport they just have them just as a formality. And so they were testing the girls like running for home to first base, and so they were like, what, can you do that again? They had to like do it a couple of times, and they're like and then so like they told her like, hey, you're going to be on the team, but like you're just never going to see any time other than like pinch running. You're just going to be a runner. You're just going to like go steal bases and stuff like that. And then she eventually like, kind of the classic like Rudy story in a way. She just, for anyone that had seen that classic movie, she eventually sophomore, junior, she was a full scholarship athlete, like doing everything, and hitting 300, whatever, and, playing D1 softball. So she's a really good athlete, super fast, obviously. And then our kids are pretty athletic, they're all young still. So it's hard to say that necessarily, but then, so yeah, they would be forwards. I think my second daughter, super intense, definitely has me and my wife, a mixture of us, very, very intense, very strong, very fast. My wife, and then my son would be probably a forward as well. He's kind of a character too, but those would be our forwards. So me and my oldest daughter, kind of like more cool, calm, collected, and maybe personalities, playing defense, and my youngest daughter playing goalie. So,
okay. So nice distribution there.
Yeah,
to make sure,
little distribution.
Make sure the ice is protected properly.
Exactly.
No, perfect. Switching from a non-hockey question. So a few years ago, I think it was Pacific Bitcoin 2023, you dressed up like Satoshi for a little bit. And so the question is, how much convincing did Aladdin have to do to get you to do that? And how hot was it wearing all that stuff around?
Oh man. Yeah. So I'm not going to lie. Like, yeah, I definitely, I don't know how much convincing he did, but it took me a tiny bit of time to accept it. I'll say that. He was just kind of like, Aladdin obviously really well. And he's one of those guys that he's so persuasive. He's such a natural salesman, but doesn't mean to be. He's just like, he's like the sweetest person in the world, but also he can be the most intense person in the world, right? So he has like this weird dynamic where he was just like, he's like, no, you're going to do it. Like, you're going to do it. And that's really all he said. And he can just tap into, I think he knows humans so well. It's like, I can't do that at the level he does at all. He's just in tune with other human beings at a level that's amazing. And so like, he just knew how to like press the right buttons with me and basically call me like chicken. Because I always joke with like, anyone's seen Back to the Future, it was like, when someone calls Marty chicken, just he like snaps all of a sudden. That's kind of me in a way. And so like, if anyone, or like, I forget, there's another one where it's like, if you say it 3 times, like, then I have to do it, or something like that. So like, he asked me like, whatever, once or twice, a couple of times, and then it was like, no, you're going to do it. And like, he said something like some competitive something or another. He just like knew the right buttons to press, and then just like walked away or did something. And I just like, was like, and then, 5-10 minutes later, I'm in the suit. I'm like, gosh, dang it. Yeah. And it was hot. It was very hot. Cause yeah, I mean, as you know, it was whatever it was, 80 degrees, outside. And then it was, in the suit there, it's like the foam, whatever. And fortunately it was like the Hollywood level suit. So it was like, it could have been way worse actually, which was very fortunate. That wasn't way worse, but yeah, I was dripping sweat pretty dang good. JD as a handler. I think there might've been someone else too, even. I think I came by your kids and gave them high fives or hugged them. I did something. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure, and they can only see out of like a tiny, like little hole or two, but I know like I saw, I saw Scott's family at some point. I saw like a bunch of people I knew. So I come up and like do something random to the people I knew. And then I was, there were some people I didn't know that I was like doing goofy stuff too. And like, the people that of course didn't like to, that aren't into that as much. So I of course did something like goofy to them. So anyway, yeah, it took him like a one-liner, basically, a Marty McFly one-liner. And then, yes, it was very hot.
Very nice. No, you are correct. You did come by, say hi, got Charlotte. We had one of those digital picture frames that's always rotating stuff. And the picture of you in the suit with Charlotte does pop up on it. I will let you know. So I get a good laugh about that whenever that does cycle through there. So that is, I don't even know if when we took the picture, if we knew it was you at that point, if Aladdin had told us.
Probably
or not.
Right.
I don't know if it was then or afterwards. But
that's so funny.
For those that know, people can probably go find some random photos online somewhere to look that up. It wasn't a cheap suit. It was definitely knocked it out like everything Aladdin does.
They crushed it. I know. It was amazing.
Good stuff. Well, that was fun with some icebreakers. Let's dive back into kind of the family side of things. So you mentioned a few times, you and your wife meeting in college, a crazy story. You can go into that as much as you want. So that's like, you met in college. From that time, did you guys always know you wanted a larger family? Where did that kind of genesis come from, and whatever craziness you would want to throw in there?
Yeah. So going back to like even the hockey a little bit, trying to think, would have been early 2000s. So I was 15 in 2002. So I was playing Little Caesars AAA hockey here in Michigan. And so there's two huge directions you can go for hockey in North America, basically. And it's playing, I should say there's a couple of different ways. One is like, if you're in like Minnesota or like Massachusetts or like out east, then kids a lot of times play prep schools. They play like high school hockey. Those are like some of the only areas, maybe New York a little bit. But like if you're in Michigan or in a lot of other states, you play AAA hockey. Generally in Canada too, you play AAA hockey. It's kind of like your AAU or, Pop Warner football or, something like that. Like it's off of the school radar in essence. It's not affiliated with school. So then once you get older, once you get into high school, you can play in some junior leagues in the United States, like the USHL or the NAHL or NAHL, not the NHL. And then the major junior in Canada, or you can play for the U.S. national team, and that's actually based in Michigan. And that team plays in the USHL or the NAHL. They play those junior teams. So like the U.S. national team is actually a team that plays in those junior leagues in the United States. And then major junior in Canada there's three huge leagues, like the Western League, the Ontario Hockey League, and then the Q, which is a Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. So it's split up. So anyway, all that being said, OHL was obviously the jurisdiction for Michigan, because obviously Ontario is, right above Michigan. So like it just basically goes down. If you're from the United States and you're in that like sector, you could play in major junior in Canada, depending on where you live geographically. So I almost played in the OHL, and it's a very similar league to NHL. It's very same rules, everything. It's like the closest you can get to playing the NHL rules wise, and just kind of how the league is set up, the number of games you're playing. And I ended up going to the U.S. national team instead and going the junior route in the United States. But I was so close when I was 15 I committed to playing for the U.S. national team my junior and senior of high school instead of going to play for the OHL. Ironically, in Michigan, there was a team that was like new that the year before in Saginaw, Michigan, which is where my wife is from. And the kids and that team billeted and like went to school in Saginaw at the Catholic school my wife went to. So we grew up like an hour apart. And I almost went there, and the team wanted to draft me number 1 overall. There's a draft for the junior leagues in Canada, and the two guys that they wanted weren't going to go. It was like one guy was from New York, and he wanted to go play in Barrie for the Barrie Colts in the OHL, and then the other guy was from out east, and I can't remember. He said, "I'm not coming. Like, don't draft me. I'm not coming." So I was the third guy on Saginaw's list, and they wanted to draft me number 1 overall. And then I was like, "Hey, I might, but I really want to go play for the U.S. national team." So I was like a week or two away because the draft happened like a week before that. The U.S. national team, we had like our camp. They invite like the 45 top kids in at age group to the U.S. Tryout camp or whatever. And they're watching it all throughout the year as well, stuff like that. So like a week or a couple weeks later, it was right before this draft. And the U.S. team called and said, "Hey, we want you to play and be on the U.S. under 17 team next year." And so I was like, amazing. Like that was my dream. Like that was one of my life goals, was to play for that team. So I say yes. And then I'm not going to OHL. So now I'm not going to Saginaw. I was that close to like being in the same school with my future wife, and which, you don't know at the time. Right. And so fast forward like 2 or 3 years, and I'm now in college. I'm at Michigan State, played for the U.S. national team under 17 and under 18, which again is junior and senior of high school. And then I go as a freshman, 18-year-old, I'm playing at Michigan State. And I'm in the cafeteria, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and from my hometown. And so my future wife, sees me in the cafeteria just at Michigan State University, like one of the huge dorm halls or whatever. And it was like, who is that? Like, whatever. And I guess one of the girls on her team already knew me, apparently liked me as well. And so she already knew, like, oh, that's Brandon Gentile. And like, granted, I'm a freshman. So like, I'm new on campus here. And she was like, that's his girlfriend behind him. You'll never have a chance with him, Jessica, like, blah, blah, blah. So like, and this is, getting the story from years later. Right. And so she saw me, and she knew who I was. And I somewhat after that, I started kind of hearing about her a little bit. She was an athlete as well. You'd have like the huge academic center for the athletes, all this stuff. So our paths would kind of cross, but we never met. And I heard about her through the grapevine from one of my teammates who had a crush on my future wife. So there's like all these intermixing, things going on. I don't meet my wife until the end of my college career. So fast forward another 3 years. I was a freshman. She was a sophomore. She's 7 months older than I am. And she's already gone. She had already graduated. I'm in my senior year, and she was back visiting one of her sisters, and just happened to literally come over and say hi, because her and her sister were friends with one of my buddies. And so they just popped in and say like, hey, what's going on? Like, I'm just in town, like whatever, how's it going? Haven't seen you in a year or whatever. And then he was like, oh yeah, he's like, this is my roommate, Brandon Gentile. And I think I was like playing video games at the time or something like that. And I was like in the corner and I was like, hey, what's up guys? And like, I didn't really like look back at it, whatever. And then, so she finds out I'm there and like was living there. So she like comes back the next week to visit her sister, and then like ends up coming over. And then we're like 30 of us, we all like hang out and we're hanging out. And I'm like, pretty much right away, I was like, I didn't believe in love at first sight, but I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I'm in love. Mind you, I had a girlfriend at the time, and I was like, oh no, this is not good. Within weeks, I had broken up with my girlfriend, who I was with for a long time, never had any issues, great person, great family, hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But I knew right there, I mean, the moral of this whole story though, truly, is that I knew right there, my girlfriend and I at the time, we were talking about getting married and stuff like that. And it was, you just don't know what you don't know as a 22-year-old and whatever. And I realized, whoa, marriage to me is either 0 or 100. Like, this is forever. I'm feeling like this about someone else all of a sudden, which had never happened before. It was a huge red flag. It was like, whoa. Like, I can't go forward. Like, I don't know if I'm going to end up with this new person or what, but like, I can't do this right now, because the fact that I'm feeling this way about someone else all of a sudden, somewhat out of nowhere. And again, the love at first sight was more or less because I knew, it's not like we just like met on the sidewalk and I didn't know about her. I had known about her and heard about her. I knew about her family. I knew about her background. She was Catholic. I was Catholic, and, she had a strong faith, whatever. So I knew these background things. And when then I met her and then I was like, whoa, when I started talking to her, that's why it was like love at first sight. Like, all came together in my head after like, years of kind of hearing about it. And so it was like, holy cow, like this is not good. And that's why within weeks I was broken up with, because I was like, hey, if I'm feeling this way, I can't go forward to this right now. We have to break this off, because this is not right. This has to all get figured out in essence. So long story long, we basically were dating for a few months, or like we started like that summer. So this was like whatever, March, April, May, this is happening. So in the summer, we're kind of like seeing each other, the traditional dating sense of how our parents and grandparents would say, we're like, you're going out with this person, like literally like going on dates or going to the movies or something like that. And we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, but we ended up like splitting apart, and it just because she was going off to law school or did grad school, and then I was going off to play hockey. And so now I'm leaving Michigan State, and now I'm going to play professional and playing, single A, double A, triple A, like whatever. But we don't know what we're doing. So it just got to the point of she was just like, I don't know what's going on. Like, we need to figure things out, and, yada, yada, yada. And so we were apart for like 2 years basically, and we keep in touch, but it was just like, hey, we got to go figure things out. And I was distraught. Like, I was just like, wait, what? Like, I was just kind of like, my world's upside down. So after 2 years, she ends up, saying, hey, I made a huge mistake. This was like the worst thing I ever did. I don't know why. And then at this time, I'm like getting hurt in hockey, and I've been praying like, God, like, where do you want me? Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I got to figure out my relationships. I want a family. I want a life. I'm, 24 years old at this time, 24, 25. And like, I'm getting hurt. My head's getting knocked around, going back to the fights, which ironically, I'd probably be in 10 or 12 fights a year with big guys that were generally bigger than me. And I'm 6'1", 210 pounds when I'm playing at this time, but I was fighting guys that were 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". So, I never made it easy on myself. I'll say that. And so that's happening. But ironically, I wasn't getting hurt with fighting. I was getting hurt by just hits. I was taking pucks to the face. Like, I got scars and my teeth are getting knocked in and stuff like that. And so you're just doing a lot of thinking of like, is this really what I want to do? And while all this is happening, so now I'm truly intertwining all the stories into kind of my life history in a way. So while this is all happening, the great financial crisis was going on, because this is 10, 15 years ago of like 08, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is when I was graduating college in 09. Then I'm playing in the pros for those next couple of years, 3 years. And I'm seeing all this happen. I was very political in the 2000s. And that's when I realized, it's not red versus blue, it's a state versus you. I was like conservative. I was like, the party of Abraham Lincoln, like fiscal conservative, capitalism, like all that stuff. And then George Bush came in and started all these bailouts. And I was like, whoa. That's not what we believe in. Like, that's not how this works. Like, we have like law and order. We have like, financial, fiscally conservative. Like, what's going on here? And that's when I woke up as a 22-year-old. So all this time, as I'm really meeting Jessica, of like, all these things are going in the background. So my time that wasn't spent with hockey or seeing her or something like that, I was studying. I found Creature from Jekyll Island. It actually all started because I found Trump Trump's book with Robert Kiyosaki, Why We Want You to Be Rich, which I didn't know Robert Kiyosaki at the time, but I knew who Trump was in '09 because I actually I was in building construction management and real estate stuff in school. And then I switched a couple times. I was in political science, and then I was in economics and pre-law. So ironically, all the things I kind of do now or talk about and think about, I was like in all these majors in college, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just was like, I don't know what I want to do. So fast forward to now, 15 years later, right, in the sense of, doing content and all the things that we talk to people about as a business owner like you, or I'm making Bitcoin content and you're making content, right? Like you're interviewing these people, and that's all that we do now. It's economics, it's pre-law, right? It's like all these things where like, I get why that job wasn't even here yet. Like these things weren't even available 15 years ago. So all that being said, going back to Jessica and I, so like this is all happening. And so I'm studying all this stuff. And so then I'm seeing the red versus blue, and then it's the collectivism versus socialism aspect of things. And I was just like, whoa. Like I need to like go home because I need to protect my family. I need to like get myself right. I need to, like, I'm traveling around the country and all these places for like what? Like what's going on? Like the world going to fall apart at some point. Because at that time, if people remember, obviously, like it wasn't good then. Like we had Occupy Wall Street going on. We had the Tea Party, which were really two sides of the same coin. At the time, everyone was told, the media was telling you that, you guys hate each other and this and that. And it's like, you look back and it's, I mean, if it wasn't like real life in a way, it would be super comical when you look back, but it's really sad because, people got hurt at that time. Like people were losing their houses. Like I had family members that lost their house. I remember moving out, some of my people I was closest to, moving them out of their house they had built because they got destroyed in the great financial crisis. And really things I'll never forget. And so you look back at all that, and then I'm studying Creature from Jekyll Island. I get into these books. I start, Robert Kiyosaki, and going down this road over these couple of years of me playing professionally, and Jess and I were keeping in touch during this time. And then I come back in 2012 and I stop because then I had a couple of concussions. I'm like, I'm out. Like I can't do this anymore. I'm done. God literally hit me on the head, knocked me on the head a few times and said, hey, how many times do I need to tell you this is not your direction anymore? And so I started a real estate team in 2013. And had some really good mentors and people that I was doing stuff right away, taught me a ton about sales, all kinds of stuff. Started doing social media content. Like that was early days. Like people, when we started doing social media content, 2013, 2014, I remember people were like, oh my gosh, like take that down right now. That's embarrassing. Like literally it was unheard of to do like a goofy Facebook video and like put it on. And that was like it was like some of the first times you could even put like a video on Facebook, I think. Even like some of the first days you could even do that. And people were just like, I remember one of my team leaders, he was an incredible salesman. He's actually, he actually has a massive, YouTube channel now, like really unbelievable educator, awesome, just great guy. And his wife called, and she worked at a huge mortgage company. It was very high up. She called him that day. We did like a goofy video, put it up on Facebook for our real estate team. And she was like, what are you doing? She's like, take that down right now. And the irony of all of it is like, he has a massive social media presence now. Anyway, it's just like, it's crazy how fast. And that was only 10 years ago or 12 years ago. Like that's how fast, moral of that story is like how fast life changes. And so this is all happening, and Jessica and I, we get back together basically 2012, 2013 as I'm stopping playing hockey, because it was like, I need to prepare my family. I need to figure out what I'm doing. And I start this real estate venture. And that's where in 12 years ago, and that's where it starts leading into Bitcoins. I'm studying gold and silver, and I'm studying all this stuff for a handful of years. And then 2014, 15, 16 is when I start hearing about Bitcoin a couple times. And I really get in like 2017, 2018. Then it was like, and then by 2020, I realized I need to get out of real estate completely. I had to fire myself from my team. I had to sorry guys, like I love all of you. You're amazing people, but like I need to be in the Bitcoin space. I don't know what it means even, but like I know I'm being called here. My entire life has basically been going towards this thing, which didn't even exist at the time 20 years ago when I was in school or in trying to figure out what I was going to do. So anyway, long story long again, but it was like, some of these were like, they're all wrapped together in essence of like my origin story, hockey ending, Jessica and I meeting, and then we were married in 2014. So we got back together end of 2012, basically 2013, January 1. And we were just like, that was dumb. Like, why did we just waste the last like 2.5 years? And it was like, she went to law school and I was playing hockey those couple years in the minors. So I wrapped that up. She wrapped up law school. It was basically right at the end of all that. And we were just like, okay, that was dumb. And so you learn those lessons. And then, like I said, during that time, I'm seeing, our money is totally corrupted. Like I was very political, like I said. And then by 2013, had 3 years, a solid 3 years of studying, hundreds of books, all kinds of YouTube content already at that time, where it was like, oh my gosh, like the whole system is designed around the money being broken and controlling everyone. So it became very, very quickly easy for me to see it. And so I was doing a lot of personal development, building up my real estate business and trying to take care of myself instead of yelling, as everyone knows, politically, you're trying to yell red versus blue and nothing happens ever. And that was all the 2000s for me in grade school, middle school, high school. I'd argue with teachers. I'd argue with professors. I'd argue anyone who would give me the time of day. I'd argue with them about politics and how the Constitution, the Bill of Rights are the only thing. We need to go back to that. Everyone believes in that. We all want freedom, blah, blah, blah. But then I realized none of these people are taught that the problem was I had a background outside of school, basically, that was studying these things. Again, going back to my dad, of like this foundation of seeing and reading history and all this stuff. And then I realized, dude, no one's like that. Like no one has that background. Like, and none of you taught this in school. So I was arguing all these things with people that no one had any recollection of any of these things. They didn't know the Bill of Rights. I mean, how many people today in the America have even read the Bill of Rights one time, or read the Constitution, or read the Declaration of Independence? Maybe 1 in 10,000, like it's, so how can I have an argument with somebody who doesn't even know what's actually happening? All that being said, we got back together 2013, married 2014, and started having kids in 2016, and here we are today. Well, that's long story.
No, it's all beautiful, and why weaves together perfectly, and even kind of circling back around to why you got into Bitcoin and bringing that into the side of things. And let's go back to the beginning of it just for a question. What popped into my head as a parent. So you talked about you had to make a tough decision. You were dating somebody at the time to recognize, hey, I think this might sound crazy, but I think this other person could be the actual one.
Uh-huh.
And obviously my kids and yours as well, they're a ways away from going down the dating side of things. But how do you think about teaching your kids to act on their gut in situations like that when the time comes? That's a difficult lesson. Going back to you have to make a decision. You mentioned that earlier, but it's a tough decision. It's an emotional one, no matter what which way you pull it. Is that something you think about, and kind of the weavy road that you guys followed, and how your kids might have to do that one day?
Absolutely. I think about it all the time. Again, as as a Bitcoiner, I think you spend a lot of time as a Bitcoiner thinking about things that the average person doesn't think about. So number one, I appreciate you having me on, because it's an outlet in a way. I think Bitcoiners need to create content to a large extent just to have an outlet, because you're looked at in a weird way from society's eyes a lot of times. And so you need these outlets, because not a lot of people want to talk about these things. Not a lot of people think that far down the road. I mean, again, the average person is on a hamster wheel, unfortunately, what we're all fighting to try to get society off of. And so it's not some oh, hey, look at us, we're so great. It truly is an altruistic, hey, we're trying to literally help everyone. You're trying to help yourself first because you're incentivized to do it, and you're trying to help your family and immediate people around you, and then you're trying to help. With all that being said, again, it's something that as a Bitcoin, I think you're looking long down the road, far down the road in many of these things. Generally with me, I found that I'm generally 20 years ahead. When I look back in my life, a lot of the things that I thought about, talked about, whatever it was, they just in the last 5, 6, 7 years started coming to fruition, because 20, 25 years ago, as a 10 to 13-year-old, that's when I started really thinking about some of these things and pondering and having recollection of predictions that I had thought, or I was wow, I think this is going to happen. One of them being, and again, I'm tangenting, of course, as I usually do. But one of them was, I could see with hockey. So going back to hockey really quickly, or professional sports, like football, physical sports. I remember my dad, so 2 things. In high school, probably in grade school, I remember thinking about this about football was, football won't exist. At least in the current state. And then fast forward now, 20 years, look what's happened. I mean, you can barely touch people to a large extent. I mean, obviously there's still tackling, there's still hits and big hits, but how much different it looks now than it did 20 years ago. Or the other thing was my dad, I was Dad, there's going to be civil war. When I was in high school, I remember we're cleaning the sidearms. We'll keep it PC, so YouTube doesn't do anything crazy to the video here, but cleaning the sidearms down in the basement. And I remember just we were talking about stuff. We talk about stuff all the time, and I was there's gonna be a civil war by the time, by the end of my life, there will be a civil war. 100%, Dad. There's just no way you can't have this. And this would have been 05, probably 06, basically, or sorry, 03 to 05 or 02 to 05. And so as a 15, 16-year-old, 14, 15, 16-year-old, these are things I thought about. I think a lot of Bitcoiners were like me in that sense, even at a young age. And so that's where you start having these things. And I look 20 years ahead, and you're kind of here we are again, 20 years later. And that's 02, 03, 04. Well, 22, 23, 24. What was happening? We got protests everywhere. We got, in effect, civil wars going on, voting, no one can figure out what's going on with voting. I think the things that are happening aren't going to look necessarily what they've looked like for hundreds or even thousands of years. And I think that's it's you had like Genghis Khan, doing what he did for, whatever, a long time ago, right? But people can be pillaged in very different ways now, right? And that's where it's like we're seeing it in very deceptive and insidious ways, the pillaging. And that's, again, what Bitcoiners, I think, are trying to avoid. So, all that being said, I look at myself and I'm like, wow, I'm generally 20 years early to these things. And then again, zooming back out to what you're saying, I think about that all the time with the kids of, there's a great book. I believe it's called Strong Daughter, Strong Father. I think I have it in the bookcase over here. And it's a phenomenal book. I mean, even if you don't have daughters, I mean, it's a great book for anyone, any parent to read. I think they do have like one for the boys. I think it's Dr. Meg Meeker, and her husband writes one about boys, I believe, as well. But anyway, it's a phenomenal book, and it's about, the parents thinking about all these things long term, but it's also staying in your kid's life always, and thinking about these things and setting them up for success, and always being involved and always telling them what you believe. And I think that's one of the things in society. I've seen this a lot now. Being 38 years old, you kind of look back and you're like, why do these people have problems, but these people don't have problems as much? And a lot of those things, one, just keeping the family unit together, massive piece of that. But then on top of that is telling your kids what you believe and standing next to those beliefs always and being consistent with that. Boy, is that massive. Because when you don't tell, it's like, well, they're 16 now, or they're 12 now. They're kind of, they seem pretty on top of it, or they're 25 now, or they're 55 now. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, you're 95 years old and you better be telling your kids what you think. It doesn't mean they're always going to follow it, but you better be telling them what you think, because you're their parent. And they're always going to take your advice. It's always going to be in the back of their mind some way. And they might not make the right decision. And this is part of the book too. They might not make the decision the first time, even they do, or the second, or the fifth, but eventually they will come back to that right decision. And again, I'm speaking in absolutes. Generally, they will come back to the right decision. Not every single person is always going to come back to it, but you might as well give yourself that fighting chance and at least let your child know, hey, this is what I think. This is what I think is best for you. I'm your father. I'm your mother. There's no one that cares about you more than I do. So you damn well better, give them that advice and say, hey, this is what I think at any age. And so again, in saying all that, it's a phenomenal book. It's a must read for anybody. One of our priest friends gave it to me like a year ago, and he a ton of people in the school had read it, all this stuff. Phenomenal book. So I think about that intuition, like you said. You nailed the word though, just intuition. I think the big problem though is that we as a society, because we're on the hamster wheel so much, we just use our five senses like animals, and we don't use our six higher faculties. And we're just not at a level where people have time to use and I always forget one of them, but they're like Bob Proctor, or like any personal development stuff. Bob Proctor talks about all the time that the higher faculties of will, perception, intuition, memory, reason, and imagination. So that's what separates us from animals, as those higher faculties. Like, animals don't have those things. Humans do. And so don't go around like you're an animal all the time, just using your five senses. Anyone could do that, but go and use those intuition. So like you said, you nailed it. Like teaching your kids to use that intuition, use their gut, use those higher faculties with higher senses. That's what's going to be the big thing, really. And I think the one thing that's really changed it with me in the last couple of years is you can have different vocations. Again, I'm a believer in different vocations. It could be religious life, could be single life, or it could be married life. And I think that so many people, and I've seen a lot of people put pressure on, like, well, you got to find a girlfriend, or you got to find a wife, or you got to find a husband. It's like, I mean, you don't. I mean, you might have a different calling. Like, who knows what that is? And I just think the society just hasn't tapped into that for so long now that we've kind of forgotten that there are different missions that every person has. So to your point, there's not some like cut and dry way to do it. It's like again, like you said, you just nailed the word. And I love that. Again, of course, it's a Bitcoiner saying it, hitting the right words, but it's truly tapping those higher faculties, and then and helping the kids tap into that even at a young age, like guiding them and telling what you believe maybe, but also trying to create an environment of fostering some of those things. I go back to like, I think you make me think of so many things, like Jocko Willink talking about his kids, like, yeah, these kids have easy lives. Like, our kids nowadays, and especially in the Western world and in America, so many of them have easy lives. It's like, you need to create some adversity in their life. And it's tough because, it makes it's a little more work for you. It's a little more, they have to go through some hardship, and they might be screaming and crying. And no parent wants that. But at the end of the day, it's like, you're the adult. You have to know that this is going to benefit them in the end. Saying no to them, or grounding them. And his thing was like, I don't know what, his daughter was doing something. He like ripped the doors off the hinges. And so she had no door in her room anymore, and something like that. And he's like, and I don't know, he's like threatening to shave her head or do something. And it's like, yeah, like everyone's got their own way and everyone's got their own way to do it. But like, let's do something to create some adversity in the kids' life. Putting me in jujitsu, talking to Brian Dement about, doing something like that, right? Like, what are some things that we can get kids out of their comfort zone so that way we're not producing more anxiety, like we were talking about before. Like, how can we not make decisions? It's because we don't have much adversity. It's like going back to the first thing we talked about, like people being punched in the face. Like, you're going to have hard points. Like, life is tough for everyone in different ways at different points of life. So you better be able to handle that somehow. So anyway, all that being said, like, I love it because I could talk for hours, I think, just about the higher faculties and like us, using them and developing them, and the kids are thinking long term about where they're going and shaping these different ways that we can create these different situations for them to be in, or whatever it might be. Anyway, I just think it's something I do think about a lot. I think it's something that parents do have to think about, and we can't be selfish to just worrying about ourselves, right? How can my kids be in these environments where they can perform, or they can grow their intuition, grow their decision-making skills, whatever. And it could just be as simple as let's get some sheets of paper when they're younger and they're 4 years old, 5, 6, 8, whatever, and just starting them in these simple things of like decision-making with simple stuff. And then as they grow, it's, hey, we have a lemonade stand, or, we're selling some books, and you bring your little ones to the conference, and like, guess what? Now they can be involved in stuff. And like, I look at like Daniel Prince, right? And having his little girls come on the pod, or like, and they talk, or they're talking on stage. And you look at like Andy Tanner, one of Kiyosaki's advisors, and his kids do that stuff. They'll talk at conferences. Those are things like, if you can start those things at an early age, that just becomes like part of it. And it's like, there you go. Anxiety is coming down, and because they're doing hard things at an early age, and they're learning to battle that and do things that most people can't even do anymore. Like, they're too afraid to make a decision. And yet you can have some kids who are over here speaking on stage. Well, why is that? It's just different parenting, different, so anyway.
It's the confidence factor.
Yeah.
Of being able to
trust
get
yourself.
out there and
yeah, exactly.
And talk,
Yes.
Mallory and I say all the time, part of the biggest benefit of us bringing Charlotte, and we'll do the same with Zoe, even though she was there when she was a baby, and having her, quote unquote, sell her bracelets, is when people tell her no. We want people to tell her no.
Yes. Right. Exactly. You don't want
like, yes, we want her to get the positive too.
Yes.
But when somebody tells her no, that's just as valuable being, she was 3 when she started, she's 6 now, but being able to understand that not everybody's going to say yes to you.
Yep.
And so getting that out of the way early is a big thing. But on the practical, so let's switch to the practical side of parenting for a second here. So one thing that always pops into my head, talking to families that are, we have 2 kids, obviously you got 4, so doubling up on us, that can make travel interesting, and not just like travel, getting on an airplane, which can be interesting, but even just like day-to-day travel, like what kind of car do you get? How do you fit the kids with the car seats and the booster seats? So for those parents listening out there who may be interested in having a bigger family, let's start with a simple question. How do you guys arrange do you have big cars? Do you have multiple cars? How do you guys fit everybody into that side of things for the practical side?
Yeah. So we have 2 vans. We have 2 normal vans. I mean, they're not big ones yet. Sprinter vans, so it's funny because it was when I was a kid, we had the huge, people will probably remember this from like the 90s or whatever, but like the bubble top or conversion vans. We used to have, my parents had one of those, and they probably put like 300,000 miles on it. I think they had it for like 10 years or whatever it was, 12 years. And so we'd go everywhere. We'd be in Toronto, like in Michigan, like you'd always, for whatever reason, like you'd always be in like Toronto, like every other weekend for hockey tournaments. And you'd be in these greater Toronto area places, or Cleveland or Milwaukee or whatever. So we did a lot of that. But yeah, for us, I mean, same thing. We have smaller, just normal minivans, and so that's what we have. We have 2 of those right now. Just thinking about that logistically, and we have 4 car seats in there. So each, we have 2 in the bench seat in the back, and then two captain chairs have, but again, where you get through a phase of maybe a year and a half where like it's a little bit of a struggle, maybe at those ages. But the older ones, I mean, it's again, they probably hit 5, 6, and like they become more helpful, and then they're getting themselves in. They're maybe helping one of the brothers and sisters get in or something like that. So there is economies of scale, and I think people get caught up in that. Like again, like you have a lot of people are like, I don't want kids, or we're not going to have kids, or something like that. Honestly, after like 2, like it just kind of becomes economies of scale, like, to be totally honest. I mean, 1 I think was a challenge, and you might have a differing opinion, but 1 was more of a challenge for the woman. I don't think it changed the guy's life too much. But then 2 changes the guy's life. Like that's where it's like, whoa, now I have to like do stuff while you're doing this one over here. So that to me was like the game changer was 2. But then after that, it was kind of like, like it was, and the older ones are helping. It's just kind of like, whatever. So that's kind of our structure right now. And I was just like, okay, but I will say though, we only used one of the vans a lot. Like the other van was the original van we had, and like it really doesn't get used anymore. So now we'll end up probably getting like I don't know, some type of, like a truck or I don't know, something like that. I've always had vans. Like we've always had vans my entire life. So like at some point now, 38 years old, my first car was a Plymouth Dodge Caravan, like a 1995 or 99 Plymouth Dodge Caravan, literally as a 16-year-old. And so that was my first car. And so I was grateful to have one, and I didn't care. I was like, sure. Like I got a van, I got a white, I looked like Dumb and Dumber, like a white, the Shaggin' Wagon or whatever the heck it wasn't looking like a dog, but I just like a white, like Plymouth Dodge Caravan or whatever. And so I was just grateful to have one. And my parents are like, if you do this, this and this, like you can, we'll give you, whatever, this couple $100 car or whatever. And I was like, sure, like, thanks. Like, but that was tough though. I will say like my high school, especially as a 16-year-old or like whatever, my high school was like kids would be showing up in like new, whatever, kids were getting whatever. And, fortunately I was a jock and I was just like bigger than everyone else. So like I didn't care. And I got along with everybody. So I was blessed in that regard, but I was just like grateful to have something. It's just vans right now. We'll probably end up getting something else. We can only use one of them right now. But it's something we're actually like kind of starting to go through right now. So it's pretty funny.
I think that the high school question begs the question. So when you went on your first date with your wife, did she have to get picked up in a van?
Yeah, I think so I was lucky because my wife is one of 5 kids and I'm one of 3. And then she's one of like 35 grandkids, big Polish, Italian, Catholic families. She has like 7 aunts and uncles. They all have like 5 kids. They were used to like, they had van, they had all kinds of stuff. And her dad is very similar to my dad. So yeah, it was just like, he didn't care. Our dads are, kind of like farmer, gardener, hunter guys. So they're just like, whatever. Like, oh yeah, you don't want that? Well, good. You get nothing. Like they're just either take it or leave it. So we're lucky in that regard where I honestly don't even remember, Scott, but 99% chance is we had a van like 15 years ago. Whenever I had like a Grand Prix at one point, I got my aunt's Grand Prix for like a couple $100 when I was playing hockey. Like it was like the summers when I was back for like a couple months in between the seasons. And I think I bought her car, because I would make, I don't know, 20 grand or 20 to 30 grand a year playing in the minors. But you didn't have to spend too much of it because the teams generally, they covered most of the stuff. So you'd get like 20 or 30 grand or something like that, but you probably wouldn't spend too much of it. I mean, guys who did, and there were guys that like spent all of it, but I tried to save like 10 or 20 grand when I was like 20 years old or 22 year old, 23, 24. I tried to save like 15 grand a year, 20 grand a year, because most of the stuff was covered for basically. So I was lucky in that regard, but yeah, I think I had like a little Grand Prix at the time. So we might have had that. And I think she had like a Chevy Malibu or something like that. So like there was a couple year period, I should say, where we didn't have a van, but then right back to vans. So grew up with vans and then like a couple years and like back to vans.
So there's a chance the first date didn't hit the van side. Well, who knows? Maybe she remembers. Exactly. And I will say from the practical side of things, talking about travel, whether you have 1 kid or 4 or 10, doesn't matter. One of the big hurdles when you're traveling on the plane side of things is when you can graduate those kids from no longer having to take an actual car seat with you, and either taking the booster or ultimately taking nothing. Obviously is the easiest, but for those parents out there listening who have going through those stages, it does get much easier to travel plane-wise when you can, get in a rental car or whatever you need to without having to lug a car seat or multiple car seats around with you.
So true. The one thing I will say too and that's such a great point in traveling, is you do more plane traveling than I do. The one thing I'll say is that the vans, again, people have their predisposition to the vans to a degree. A bunch of our brothers and sisters were like, we're not getting vans and blah, 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 blah. They all have vans now, all of them. So like, because they all have like 3 kids each and all like whatever. And so like and every single one of them to a T. So it's like 10 people total between the brothers, sisters and their wives, husbands, whatever. All like, yeah, that was the best decision we ever made, like whatever. Because some of them wanted to get like an SUV or like stuff like that, or a Tahoe or something like that. But I don't know, man. They're just the ergonomics on the Tahoes, like for little kids, it's just so much easier with the van. Like the doors come open, it's just easy, it's like automatic. They can jump in and jump out. Like I can see like kids are like 10 and up having like van type of stuff, or like a Tahoe or like something like that. But so many people were like getting Tahoes the last 10 years. I'm like, man, like that's crazy to me. And like the van, and everyone got the vans after that, and we all have like the same van. Like literally there's like 6 of them. Like people show up, there's like 6 like minis, like all the same exact thing. And so I just like laugh and make fun of them all, because Jessica and I are the oldest. So we like had one first, and our kids are the oldest. And so now all of them have vans. I'm like, oh yeah, it's pretty nice, huh? And they're just like, dude, it's amazing. And then, they're front wheel drive, like they just ride smooth, tons of room. And you're just like, dude, this is living.
There we go. Well, we had our, I guess a few weeks ago during my interview with Stacy and Justine, Stacy was shouting out Uncrustables. So we needed an Uncrustables sponsor. So this one, if you're out there listening, van companies, if you
There
want
you
to
go.
sponsor this episode, we'll throw your logo up there
Exactly.
and
Boom.
get the big sales rolling in.
So true.
Bring it back to sports for a second. One of the things you touched on at the very beginning was around the whole life of not just kid sports in general, but there's normal kid sports, there's competitive, there's travel, no matter whether it's hockey or baseball or basketball or swimming, you can find that on that side of things. For those parents that are out there kind of just diving into the kids and sports side, and you mentioned you guys are doing it but staying away, a middle ground there.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you give for parents as they're thinking about, hey, should I put my kid in sports? What type of sports? How competitive should I push them? Maybe pull on that string a little bit longer.
Man, yeah, this could be a couple hours just alone on this as well. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like being in sports is super important just for the learning the team aspect. And I think this is where the debate really starts to bifurcate, though, is what level of sports they need to be at. And this is what I was touching on earlier of what is your end goal? Like, what are you doing this for? If your kid is amazing at something and they love it more than anything, sure, let's go down that road, maybe do some travel stuff, do some, whatever, extra training. They're getting, private coaching, whatever it is. Sure. But again, for 99% of the kids, it's just like, it's unnecessary. And so I guess the debate comes in, like, at the end of the day, are you prioritizing family and you and your family being together? Or is it, hey, I'm spending time, money, and resources and energy on this one child to go do what? Like, that's the ultimate question that parents have to ask themselves and really think about, pray about, whatever it is. Like, you gotta figure that out, because like it really starts to like dominate whatever you're doing. And imagine if you had two kids doing that, and now mom's going this way, dad's going that way, and you're not spending much time together, and then they're in school on top of that, or whatever it is. Like, you start to really, you kind of see where you start going. It can start spiraling in the sense of you're not spending that much time together. You're not spending time with your immediate family, let alone extended family. If you're not close to your extended family, okay, great. But if even your immediate family, if you like spending time with your immediate family, you think that's an important thing in your life, then you might not be doing as much of that if sports start to really dominate. And again, I haven't been around that scene for 10 or 20 years, and it was a lot then. I know for a fact it's only gotten crazier now. And so I'm not even in the depths of that, but I know just from people that are in that life, like, past, guys that maybe played, pro or played Michigan State that are 10 years older than me. For a while, I played hockey, once in a while with those guys, stuff like that. And their kids are all 10 to 15 years older than mine. And you'd see what they're going through or whatever. And coaches back in the day, like for us, they like wouldn't even get paid. They just did it because, maybe his son was on the team or something like that. But a lot of the guys didn't even they would do it just because it's like, hey, I love doing it or whatever. Now it's like there's coaches making 50, 80, 100 grand a year more just to like coach a AAA team or like a travel team. It's like, wait, what? I mean, it's insane. So then you can already see like the level of expectation at that. It's like, okay, well, are we trying to train to a certain thing, or is it are we trying to win the game? Like what, it's like, it's this whole thing. And again, Fiat has largely done that, where again, the football, like you can't hit anybody. You can't, hockey, there's not fighting anymore. We talked about policing the game and being a very unique sport. There's not a lot of that. They've taken that out. And so there's different reasons, for that. Some of it's just political, which is a whole different rabbit hole to go down. But then you look at football and some of these things, guys can't afford to get hurt. They literally can't afford, because there's so much riding between sports betting, gambling, which again are whole nother rabbit holes we could go down on other episodes of sports or Fiat destroying sports. And so you have guys that, you look at a quarterback that gets hurt, goes down, the season's over. I mean, like all the betting that goes on that, a lot of these games are unwatchable now because of the resources poured into this one guy, or the focus around this one guy, or whatever it is. It's really mind blowing what's happening with sports, instead of now let's bring it back down to your original question, which is why I kind of start like going all over the place with this, is because I've had legit arguments with people that I'm close to about this, and they're like, how can you even say that? Like, this doesn't even, like, you've had so many good things, or you've done so many amazing things. Like, yeah, but like, what's your definition of doing amazing things? Like, yeah, I traveled to Russia. My first international tournament was in Russia in 2003. And it's like, you have like kids throwing snowballs at you in your bus, and you're like, we were playing the Russian national team and stuff. And you're just like, I mean, that's amazing, but like, it's just a memory in my head. Like, so it's like, you can get into debate of like, well, that shaped you, that formed you. I mean, like, yeah, it did, but it didn't. Like, what did I learn from that? Like, there's guys with AKs like in the stands, like they're soldiers, like just literally like in the stands. But it's like, like again, like what am I truly getting out of that? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's wild, Scott, because like, again, I could talk for hours about this, but it's like you're sacrificing so much for what? And that's what you have to be very careful about. And you have to be very intentional. And I think if there's one word that I could give to people, it's that intentionality. It's like going back to the higher faculties and these six senses, using your intuition, using your gut, but like also intentionality. Like, what is my end goal? Is my end goal to have a strong, very strong family unit? Is it to spend time together? A lot of those things go hand in hand. If you have a stronger family, it's probably because you spent more time together. It's probably because mom and dad were able to parent more, and they were able to, kids need to still blossom and go do their own thing. And like we said, learn things on their own, but you better be spending that time when they're young, setting that structure for them. And so that they have a steady foundation to then make their own decisions as they get older and as they grow, while you're still giving your input all along the way, albeit they're not going to maybe take your advice all the time, or at least right away, but they're going to be more predisposed to it. They're going to know what you think, and maybe they will be taking it. I mean, anyway, all that to be said, what is your end goal at the end of the day? What are you aiming for? What is the point of doing said thing? I think that's the thing that a lot of society just hasn't. School, the same thing. What's the end goal? I mean, look at school now. What are we training them for? I mean, Robert Kiyosaki, again, has probably done the best out of anybody in the world the last 30 years of saying, yeah, like, why school is there to what? Teach you how to go to school, get a job, get good grades, get a 401k, to invest in this pension. And all those things aren't really to help you. Like, none of those things, like, it's an old antiquated world that doesn't exist anymore. And you talk to the average person, they kind of know it. They see AI, they see things coming, they see these things happening. They're like, oh, they'll talk about how amazing YouTube is and what they learned over here, but then they won't put two and two together to realize, like, oh, why is my kid going down the street for 8 hours a day, doesn't go to recess ever, doesn't do what a kid should be doing, but they're in a cinder block, 4 cinder block walls for 8 hours a day. For what? Is it because it's glorified daycare, or is it because that's where they learn best? Is that how they learn best? Now I can watch an MIT professor talk about, the aeronautics of an F-22 Raptor. And is Mr. Smith down the street just by chance because he lives next to me? Is he going to know more about aeronautics? Or should I watch YouTube to have a better person teach me that? Or should I have AI teaching that? So all that to be said, it's not that there's one right answer. It's what is the end goal? What's the intention of why I'm doing this with my child? Or what's the intention of being in sports? What level? So again, bringing this all back, what's the level of sports they need to be at? Should they be in some jujitsu to learn how to get bopped in the face here and there and to kind of deal with that adversity of some physical pain? Should they be in travel sports? Should they be, or is it good enough just to play some rec league sports so they can learn some teamwork and learn how to just be a part of a team? And maybe that's enough for 99% of kids. Or, because at the end of the day, most kids never play AAA or the highest levels of sports. So you can't even say like, oh, every kid needs to do that, because every kid doesn't do that now. And they haven't ever done that so right there, what is my intention? If I'm doing all these private lessons, I'm doing all these things just because, well, you can get teamwork anywhere. You could find teamwork anywhere. If they're great at it and they love it, then hey, that's a conversation that you have to have as a family, obviously. So anyway, I'll try to cut myself off now on it, but because I literally have had many arguments. You touched a vein there, because I've had many arguments with it. I've talked about this with my wife a lot, being, high level athletes. And just the intention of it. And you kind of look back and you're like, well, why are we doing these things? Like, my intention is to spend time with my family and to do many things together. It's not to have all of you going off all over the place. I'm not going to sacrifice, going on mass on Sunday. I'm not going to have like sport. I'm not going to have these things get in the way of a family, the nuclear family, the dynamic of, quite honestly, what I believe, a lot of it's been destroyed over the last 50, 60 years. And you have families all over the place now. And I can't help but think that a lot of that has to do with that fiat destroying so many things, and sports being one of them, just like taking over life of like, well, can't go to so-and-so's thing because, we have a lacrosse tournament. It's like, okay, well, for what? Like, anyway, yeah, it's a whole thing that I could spend hours and hours on.
I think that we can put a pin in it and then just say that it might be a perfect kind of one-off episode down the line, just to touch on parents and sports and kids, and especially you mentioned having some future potential writings coming out. So definitely can kind of
circle back on
focus an episode just on that and dive down on it. And you did weave some of you're talking to kind of the learning side of things. And like you mentioned earlier on the homeschool, you started a year or two ago. And one thing that's interesting that you mentioned, that you and your wife split up subjects between what you guys do. That's something we actually started doing in our house as well. Nice. So kind of maybe just give the audience, what's the typical day look like? How do you guys split up the subjects? And kind of what's that structure?
So yeah, we'll get up and do, an hour or two, just depending obviously on what the day is or whatever. I'm generally doing math, history, geography. Sometimes I'll get into religion or something like that, but it's generally those like 3 or 4 things. And then Jessica's doing, handwriting and science, stuff like that. So she's kind of handling that side of the spectrum. And then I'm handling that, like more the number side, and then history, geography stuff. So we do that. And so we'll get up and we'll basically take care of all the kids' stuff between, I don't know, call it 7 to 9 a.m. type of thing. Like, get them situated, get some of their stuff done. And then we'll go and she'll either go off to work after that. And then I'm hanging with the kids and we're doing stuff and going outside or whatever, or it's vice versa. So it's like, I'll go off to work after we do. So we literally tackle it together, albeit separate subjects, separate areas with the separate kids, but then we'll all be together, and then we go off and do mom or dad goes to work, so to speak, type of thing. Like one of us goes off to work and then the other one's with the kids. And then, yeah, we'll just kind of do whatever. It's playing outside, going back to the sports thing really quick. It was like, we a couple years ago, or my wife, the advantage with girls is that you can play with the boys, and that is like travel. So like there's a lot, like there's more girl leagues now. And like, obviously when we were growing up, there wasn't as many like girl leagues per se. Girls just played with the boys. That was just like normal. Well, now a lot of it is like there's separate girl leagues, and there's been such a push for girl stuff that they don't even let you, like a lot of the areas that were around us, they didn't even let the girls play with the boys. And my wife played with the boys, like basically rec league baseball up until like 12 years old. And so that was like her playing travel. So she played 6 weeks a year, but like with boys. So it was like playing travel. And that's kind of like the beauty of being a girl, is like you can just play with boys in any sport at any level in essence. And it's like playing up a level or two, generally, depending on the age, but generally, so to speak. So that was kind of like, dang, like that was a bummer, because for our 2 oldest girls, it was like, well, shoot, you guys can play, boys stuff or whatever for a number of years, and like that's perfect. Well, then they're like, no, you can't. Like the girls have to play in their own things. I was like, oh man, like a year ago, we were like trying to get them all in, and they're like, nope. And then because of the way their ages felt, they had to like play all separate leagues because they were separate ages and couldn't mix genders. So I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to the ball field for 3 hours to watch all of these guys play for 5 minutes each. I'll just go in the yard and we'll play for 30 minutes a day. You'll get 6 times the amount of work in each day, and whatever that is, twice a week that they're going to do it at the thing. Like, I'm not going to waste 3 hours and have everyone else just running around just doing who knows what and watching everyone else play and hit the ball. It's like, I can go on the tee with you guys out here and play catch in the yard, do stuff like that. So over the last like year and a half, that's what we've done. I've just been like, no, like if you guys want to, again, this goes back to this whole conversation, which again, we can dive into some other time, of like, what's the intention of it? If you want to learn teamwork, there's many ways to do that. Like you don't need to be on a sports team to necessarily do that. Just catch all of like, well, they learn teamwork. And it's like, yeah, I mean, part of it too is just keeping kids out of riffraff as well. Like that's why kids play sports as well. So like, there's many ways we can accomplish that though. So anyway, all that being said, it was like, I'll go play in the yard with you guys. Mom can teach you how to do a lot of stuff because she's great at it. Or, depending on the sport, it's like, hey, one of us will teach you in the yard. We'll get a much more work in, and we're not wasting our time over here hanging out with who knows who, down at the city park just because that's what dad and mom did growing up, or just because that's what society tells you to. So anyway, there's a common theme of intentionality, very Bitcoiner thoughts of like intentionality, not doing things just because that's the way it's always been done. And at some point, some of this stuff will obviously transform into, I'm sure, like more organized stuff over the next few years. But for right now, it's just like, I'm not wasting my time on these things with, I'm sorry, but like, Johnny Joe Blow, who's coaching the team, who knows nothing that's going on, where I can like, no, I'm going to have private lessons with my kids at home for the next few years and a bunch of different sports. And then, hey, go off and do whatever. If you love something, then you can go do it when you're 8, 10, 12, like you can go off and do something. How many kids you see in the NFL draft? There's like 5 kids each year, or a couple kids each year that are guys, I should say, are 22 years old. And they're like, yeah, you just started playing football 5 years ago. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what were you in? So, I mean, hockey is one of those sports where it's one of the few sports you probably can't get away with that. You have to learn to skate. It's like the minor detail. You probably should learn that when you're younger. That helps a lot. But like all the other sports, I mean, we all know how to run, we all know how to walk. So like, can you refine some of those things? Yeah, for sure. But like after a year or two of training, or a couple years of training, you can pretty much pick up any sport at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, and you're going to do whatever you need to do and build or work your way into it. So anyway, it's just kind of like after being through that ringer and just kind of seeing all of it, you're kind of like, a lot of this is just pointless. Like this, it doesn't even matter. And then on top of that, again, there's something we can get into more another day about sports specifically. But I mean, so many of the guys, like I was on, the Team Michigan Select, 17, when we're 17, I think like one or two of those guys play, or a couple of guys played in the NHL from that team, but like none of them were like the highest ranked guys. Like every other guy, like I never played in the NHL. And like 90% of the guys never played in the NHL. Yet at that time, like a year before the NHL draft, all of us were ranked ahead of the couple guys that were like literally our last four on the team and the last defenseman on the team. Those guys went on to have like 12, 15-year NHL careers, and no one else did. Like there might have been a couple other guys that like got a couple games or something like that. But like the rest of us, got hurt. I got hurt, like the wrong times, wrong places. And it was like, for what? Like I just spent the last 10 years, 15 years, and it's like, gone. And so it's like, if you don't understand that, then you're setting yourself for failure. If you don't understand that can just be gone in a blink of an eye, and you spent all this time doing it for what? Again, intentionality. So anyway, it's a whole nother time for, we can go deep down those rabbit holes.
Beautiful. No, we definitely will do that. And before we dive into the final two questions, I just want to remind the audience that they're welcome to use code BFF Show for 10% off at Xiaomi.com. So feel free to come over, check out our books, games, plushies, anything else you got. Oh, Brandon's got a couple things right there.
Couldn't find the other books. Kids reading them somewhere. So they're around. One of the three.
Exactly. Or worn and used.
Yeah.
Feel free.
New ones, by the way.
Feel free to use that code. And so let's wrap things up with the same two questions every time. So that first one is, a common saying in the Bitcoin space is Bitcoin is time. Another belief is that time is the scarcest asset the world has ever created. So playing off of all that, what's the biggest gift of time that Bitcoin has provided your family?
Honestly, I think the real easy answer is everything we've kind of talked about. It's the ability to homeschool the kids. It was a really tough decision because we went to this Catholic school for 2 years, phenomenal people. Everything was great about it, but it was the time that we the hardest part was pulling them away from the people and the people we had met, and so all that. The answer was easy, but the process was difficult. Bitcoin has given us that time ability, or the ability to have that time where we can be mobile. We have the ability to say, no, we're going to homeschool the kids. We're going to do this. And so, Bitcoin securing that time, in saving your time and energy in that immutable money, that's perfectly fine. I always tell people whenever, people ask this stuff, it's like your time and energy is finite on earth. God only gives you so much time. And so each person is finite, and we've always been trading it for something that was more or less infinite, and which is insane. I mean, fiat obviously is absolutely infinite. And then you have gold and silver, which for thousands of years was the best form we've had. But that had a smaller inflation rate as well, anywhere from whatever, 0.5%, maybe 1% to 2%. You're incentivized as that grew in at least nominal price, then or just value, purchasing power. People were incentivized to dig more out of the ground or find other ways to whatever, alchemy, and try to create, fake gold and silver, whatever it was. So first time in human history, humans have had the ability to trade their finite time and energy for a finite money. It's literally, humans have never, ever experienced anything like that before. Your time and energy, you pour it into this container. So you're making that trade every day you go to work, you get up, and we've all done it. And our parents did it, and our grandparents, and they were trading it for these infinite pieces of paper. So your finite time, it was the worst trade in all of human history. You're taking the only time you have on earth and trading it for something that was infinite. An unbelievably great scam by the people who are winning the Cantillon effect, and the people using the money, the currency printers. So an unbelievable trade for those people, but for the other 99.999%, it was just a terrible trade. And we just, for a long time, we just didn't really know any better, unfortunately, and people just didn't, again, ask these questions and zoom out like we've been talking about this whole show. No one zoomed out and asked, well, why? What is the intention of this? Why am I working for this? What am I trading for? And so Bitcoin gives you that time, and has given us that time, and has given many Bitcoiners that time, and what all of us are working for, to save that perfect trade, finite for finite, pouring that time and energy into a finite container that doesn't leak inflation, doesn't leak that time and energy out that monetary container. And so finally, first time in human history, humans have found that, and it truly has, over the last 5-10 years, given us that ability to make decisions that were for the betterment of us, and spending more time as a family and teaching our own children, and not be forced, unfortunately, to send them to school and send them to a place that's glorified daycare. I mean, again, let's call it what it is. I mean, it's not everyone has the temperament to homeschool, and not everyone, like I'm not a doctor, I'm not an ER doctor. So yes, are there some people that need to send their children somewhere? Yes, absolutely. But I don't believe that all children should be sent to a school or something like some formal compulsory setting. It doesn't make sense for every child and for every family. And I think there's a lot of families that are seeing that, realizing that, and we look back 50 years from now, and I think it's going to be drastically different, like very, very drastically different, of how school looks and how education looks. And Bitcoin, to me, it by far, that's the thing. It's given me time to sit back and make better decisions for me, my wife, and my children, and like you were saying earlier, like the longevity and the intuition of these future things. You kind of look 20 years in the future and say, hey, where do we want to be in that time period? What's the best way to get there? And Bitcoin's given us that ability to save time so that we can have it and breathe instead of being on the hamster wheel 24/7 and make sound decisions.
Beautifully said, for sure. I co-sign all of that there. And so dive into that final question here. If you had one Bitcoin to give each of your kids, at what age would you give them the key and why?
Again, something I've thought of a fair amount as well, actually. So I think it's more of I don't have a great answer yet. I've been thinking about it a lot, but I think what a lot of where I've kind of come around to is the temperament. Again, using your intuition, like using your own intuition to a degree of like, when are they ready for it? And I don't think that is an answer necessarily. And I think it might be like stair-stepped almost. Like it might be a little bit here, maybe at different points. Like, hey, the thing I've been into the last few years, and I think Mark Moss talks about this a little bit, over time. And there's some people, Kiyosaki would talk about this over time, but albeit not so much in the Bitcoin space. But you talk about like family trusts or estate planning just in general. The thing that's always intrigued me is like a family constitution, going back to like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and stuff like that. That was always like, those were always things that were near and dear to me. But your family, the same thing, like teaching them, like for instance, I've journaled for the last like 9 years, like every day. And it could be like a page or two, but a lot of times it's just like a couple paragraphs or, 5, 6, 7, 8 paragraphs of like what we did that day or just thoughts. It could be political thoughts, could be family thoughts, whatever. But, there's only so many things you can give your kids, money, you can give them, journals, basically writings, like photos. There's like Jim Rohn always would say, like, there's like the 3 things you can hand down to your children, basically, aside from like, maybe values and things like that. But like, what are physical things in essence? Maybe you could give them photos, journals, money. So that to me was like, how can we create this family constitution in a sense of like, at what point are you ready to do this? And in one of those ways, again, like, and you guys doing this with your kids already at an early age, and I have not. So, kudos to you guys. I have not done this yet with mine, but it was talking about, or going back to like selling bracelets. I think I might have told my kids about you guys doing that actually, and they want to start doing that. But even like a lemonade stand, we're going to try to do that this year. Like just simple stuff like that. So like you said, they can start hearing no, they can start seeing commerce and just like people interacting back and forth and just being comfortable talking to other human beings, other adults, stuff like that. And then I think that just goes along with like the intuition as a parent of, this is when they're going to be ready to do that. And say, hey, you're going to start a business at this age, or you're going to do these things. And then, because at that point, then, okay, they're going to start learning things about themselves that I can't even teach them, right? Like if they're doing these things, they're going to start coming across these things in life that I can't. We talked about like creating adversity for them, or like creating these scenarios where they have to learn, they have to develop their intuition, they have to develop like, hey, what's a good partner for me, or whatever it is. Well, the kids can start learning that at an early age. And I think that, again, that's like goes to the ills of like the old legacy institutions and the education system. No one's taught any of that. It's just like, hey, sit down, the bell rang, open your notebook, let's memorize things. And that's an old world where the old entrepreneurs of the world wanted a bunch of worker bees. And we know that because they talked about it. We have their writings. So we know they wanted a bunch of worker bees, and they didn't want competition. They didn't want other entrepreneurs. They didn't want other people innovating and being creative, and they didn't want to battle with that. So now it's like, how do we reverse that? All that being said, I don't have a great answer, but I think we'll know more over time, right? Like you'll know each of your children. And I think it's like, hey, what are you getting? We were just talking about this weekend actually with like Warren Buffett and how he's giving most of his wealth away, or at least, so to speak, he's giving it away. We'll see. I think he's still giving like $1 billion to his kids, but I think it's, again, and I go back to you. I think you guys are a great example of this. You have to involve your kids from an early age into this. That's the most important thing. And it's like goes back to, I was listening to something about Dave Ramsey the other day, and someone was asking him like, hey, my kid's 18. We have a business, and I'm kind of worried about him, seeing the finances and all this stuff. And it's like, that's to me, like, again, you're doing that with your kids. They're already involved in business. Like my kids, I talk about the same thing. I talk about money. I talk about what it is. I talk about how it works. They know what I do. Like that just has to be something that is a part of their life, and them growing and learning these business skills and communication skills and financial skills. Like these are things that you should just know, because again, like why are we pouring all this other stuff into their head that they're never going to use? I mean, what are the things we all complain about school now? Oh, they don't teach us anything we're going to use. Well, there's probably an issue there, guys. Like, we should probably figure that out. So maybe we should try something else. But in that time, though, the problem is most people get a hard time from people around them. They're like, "Whoa, what are you teaching your kids?" So like, what's going on? And it's like, yeah, but then like 50 years from now, everyone looks back and it's like, wow, you guys were really ahead of the curve. Like, we all should have probably done that. It's like you don't win. It's always an unwinnable situation. But as a parent or someone who's someone forward thinking, you have to just deal with that. Like, you're gonna get crap from people, and you're from the laggards and the late adopters. You're going to get people in all walks of life that just don't see it. They got their head in the sand, and as a smart, common sense person who's plugged into the system and wired in, you just got to deal with that. Like, that's just something we all have to deal with, and we're all going to get crap for it. And it is what it is, and you have to just man up and be like, yeah, like that's. But it's you're still human. It's like it takes a toll on you, but it's just sticking together. Knowing what know what you know. Stick to your guns, stick to your spouse, and be like, hey, we're going to get crap for these things, but we got to set things up the right way. And in saying that, that's my word salad answer for when you should give your kids or the Bitcoin or whatever it is. I mean, maybe it's again different. There's so many different strategies for it, but it's something, again, we could do a whole hour or a couple hours on that alone, because I think that's such a fascinating thing, and that's something that, again, the next 10, 20 years is going to be a massive thing in the Bitcoin world that we're all going to encounter.
Yep. No, for sure. And that's I think a perfect place to wrap part one of this conversation up. Now we've learned, we'll dive deeper down on a later date. But Brandon, thanks so much for jumping on the show, supporting, it, being able to get out there and talk about these things. Didn't have a chance to mention. So for those that are out there, be sure to not only follow Brandon on social media, but also the Playable Characters podcast that he runs. So go check that out. Many great conversations. I would give another plug to Aladdin and Bitcoin trading cards. And so Brandon works with them as well. So go check out those trading cards. Go pull one of Brandon cards and find him at a conference to sign, and be able to get that and take it home. So anywhere else you want to send people, or final words that you want to leave people with?
Oh, yeah, just Brandon_Gentile. I think on everything on Twitter, Nostr, YouTube. Check all the content out there. Yeah, mainly interviewing people and stuff like that. And what you guys are doing is awesome in so many ways. I mean, all this, the content, what you're doing here with this podcast, obviously filling these gaps. These are massive because, and again, I've told you this many times. I mean, having young kids, there's such again, half this episode in a way was about intention, but also just there's such a lack of the children's education, of actual good children's education. So that's why it's so great what you're doing here. And then what you guys are talking about on this podcast, obviously, is huge because there's so much financial stuff, and that's a fair amount of our podcast. We touch on different things, but people love hearing the numbers, this and that, blah 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 blah. But what you guys are doing is very noble and amazing. So kudos to you guys for I don't get to sit here and, again, as a Bitcoiner, you don't get, like we said earlier in the beginning, you don't get to talk about this stuff very much. So I appreciate you giving me a chance and other people a platform to just kind of run their mouth and get things off their chest and talk about things that you just don't get to talk about, quite honestly, that much, unless you're a content creator, which people listening that aren't content creators in the Bitcoin space, I'd urge you to do things as well, whether it's a blog or, whatever, videos, diaries, everything, because we need to overwhelm the system somehow. But there's just not a lot of people in the world right now that unfortunately want to talk about these things. They're not always fun. They're not always easy. Sometimes they are far off into the future. Like we said, they're 5, 10, 20 years away. But someone's got to build it. Someone's got to do it. And that goes back to, again, we'll have this talk later on too, but the American Revolution, the other book, like the sports and Bitcoin, but also the American Revolution, is a couple % of people fighting and saying, hey, no more. And again, we go back to what we just said too. Most people aren't going to get along with what you're saying. They're not going to understand it. They have really no perception of what's going on, unfortunately. But that's life. Like you go look back thousands of years in the Bible, and that's the same thing. Most people were like, no, like we just wanted to, whatever. I'm gonna be careful what I'm gonna say, actually. So it's a story of just constantly falling into the same traps and not learning our lessons. And that's where, if we can somehow break out of that, Bitcoin being that thing, like we said, the first time ever, having this ability to break free from the system, get off the hamster wheel, at least in the human realm, we give ourselves this chance that we've just never had as humans. Yeah, you can find me all those places. And like I said, the moral of the story is thank you for giving me and other people a chance to kind of, share the story, run our mouths a little bit, because we just do it. We don't always get to, but I think, things are headed in a much different place. 10 years, 20 years from now, we're going to look up and things are going to be very, very different. And I know we're all very hopeful for that. So thank you, Scott.
Perfect. Well, thanks to everybody out there that's been watching or listening to this episode. We'll be back next week with the next one, but enjoy this one while it's out there and enjoy the rest of your day, and happy 4th to everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.
Hi. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a good review. And buy your kids some stuff at Summary.com today. Bye. 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 Bye.